Good evening, everyone. Sorry that we're starting a little bit late. We're having a few technical difficulties because technology always loves to surprise us when we least expect it. I know the other week we were getting a thunderstorm and I was kind of terrified that that the thunderstorm would like knock out my power, but thankfully it did not do that. Um, so Welcome to Restitching the Tapestry. I am Donny Winter. This is episode 4, and I am, of course, joined by my wonderful friend Ari Whipple, who goes by Strange Nothings on YouTube. So go check out their channel, please. Ari, how are you doing this evening?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I am dandy as a dandelion. In other words, pretty good. I like it's been a long day today and I'm kind of pooped, but I'm still trying to make the best of it because that's what we have to do. And I just think in general, this whole past week has just been a very, very hectic week. So,
It's been a hectic week.
yeah. So, RP's on. Hello. Gonna wait another minute or so for more people to tune in. We'll see if any more tune in. Um, so, I think for me this past week, I mean, not only has work been super busy for me, but with all of the social turmoil that's been happening, I've been in very much like hyperdrive mode where I've been like calling people out, really trying my hardest to ignore like any type of repercussions on myself. And now I finally have had a chance to be like to decompress a little bit and be like, ooh, I need
And
to
I think this is the
recharge.
perfect time to talk about our mental health because, like, I think that, like, during all of this, like, social, like, justice, social uprising, like, you have to, like, not ignore your mental health because, like, people neglect that. They neglect self-care, and I think that it's really important to, like, during this time that you pay attention to that because, it's the most important time now when we're taking care of all of these things to really pay attention to that.
Yes, I completely agree. Well, and it's like I just think that I mean everything right now is so distracting that it's easy to distract ourselves from caring about ourselves too.
Mhm.
And and I won't lie, I am one of the like I do that more often than I would like to admit. So this episode tonight is definitely going to be kind of I mean, I think it's going to be beneficial for us both because it's good conversation about something that's very, very personal to both of us. But it's also gonna be my way of holding myself accountable for getting the help that I need, that I know that I need. So, so before we go any further, first of all, hi, Igni. How are you? It's good to see you. RP asks, how have you been coping with Ian's passing? So Sir Ian Holm passed, um, one of my favorite actors. I'm doing much better than I was. Thank you for asking. I really appreciate it. I think that could have been part of another reason why this past week has been kind of difficult for me because I was grieving that too. But before we go any further, I do want to uh, read our mission statement because I think it's important for everyone to know what the intent is behind the show for every episode that we do it. So here it goes. Many witness different atrocities, large or small, that fray the social fabric around us. Much of the time, many may feel powerless and know not how to address those. This fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media because trauma has been made much more immediate for us to witness. And having it go viral where people can watch it unfold in real time allows us all to experience a collective grief and outrage. What can we do to mend the communities that have seen considerable tragedy, most of which privileged groups have caused, and many who won't really admit their involvement? So, in light of that, let's work on restitching the tapestry together through conversation, creativity, and action. And honestly, for tonight's episode, I think people don't often understand that those who do experience different bouts of mental health are almost in a way in communities of their own. And sometimes when people who don't share in those difficulties don't really understand, it isolates people who are going through those various mental health bouts. Okay. So we find comfort in one another, especially if we can relate with one another on those difficulties we experience, you know. So that's like, I wanted to do that to preface this episode a little bit. Okay. So I think what we should do first and foremost is talk a little bit about our own personal histories um, with mental health. So, Ari, would you like to begin with your story?
So at first I thought I just had depression, and my depression goes back for a very long time. I would have I would find myself having probably depression back when I was a kid. Um, Probably like 8 or 9. I can remember having depression, where I would just find myself sleeping more than regular people, and like just feeling kind of like alienated more than I feeling alienated at certain points, and just feeling like not just feeling like out of sorts, um and just not feeling normal at certain points, and just not feeling good, and just having like social anxiety at certain points. Like I wanted to be social, but I would find myself having trouble, like that I would always like it would always get messed up somehow, or that I would always like it would always get into trouble, or it just didn't work out the way I wanted it to, and that I was just finding myself like getting not having it would just always just not work the way I it would just always somehow just get flubbed up somehow. And I would just find myself like getting less and less interactive with my social peers as I got older. And I would just sort of fall into these like I just felt socially awkward and socially and it just my anxiety got higher and higher as I got older, and I just found myself socially isolating more and more as I got older, until in my 20s I was, you know, I would I would have these moment and then, I'd have these moments where I would be really depressed, and I didn't realize that I was having these moments where I would be really high and then I would get really depressed. Like I wasn't really thinking about the high moments. I was thinking mostly about the depression. And so, but I was having these high moments where I was like getting involved in all these clubs and I was doing all this stuff. And I would just in college, I would be like doing all this stuff and I would be doing it at the beginning of the semester and I would be like full of this energy and full of this potential. And then I would crash, and I didn't realize that, hey, maybe that's a bipolar tendency, because I was like, I didn't really think about that because I didn't really think that maybe I had bipolar, because that wasn't something that was like maybe something that I had. But like now in retrospect, now that I have been diagnosed with it, that's like, oh, yeah, that's something that's what I had at the time. Like it makes sense in retrospect, but at the time it didn't. I just was thought I had depression because I would hit the crash and then I would fall and I would almost fail my classes, and I was like so depressed at the end of the semester that I just couldn't get out of bed, and I couldn't function. So I was always finding myself like noticing the fall, that I wasn't noticing the like super high highs and the super functionality, because the functionality, like I was working and I was doing stuff and I was you know, like I wasn't noticing that because that was like I was actually working and functioning, but I wasn't noticing the non-functionality. So that was pretty much how I would go about my business up until my 30s, is that I would just kind of start a project, or start kind of like these life goals where I would take on a whole bunch of stuff take on a whole bunch of life things until I would hit a breaking point, and then I would crash, and then I would like it would almost destroy everything in my life, and then I would, like, crawl back from the depths and just, uh, try to, like, maintain some sort of balance, but it was like I was, like, doing this cycle of, trying to, you know, up and down and up and down. I mean, it was getting worse every time until I had my first manic episode at 33. So,
Hmm. So, I mean, that like I think it's interesting that in a way you were like in a way like that diagnosis that you received was the thing that like kind of helped put all the puzzle pieces together for you.
mhm,
And like when you did discover, well, when you did find that out, were you really struggling with that diagnosis? Like, was it really?
it was, yeah. I didn't believe it at first. I didn't. I thought it. Well, when I first was diagnosed, I was under psychosis, so I didn't believe anything that was happening around me. I didn't understand what was happening at all, so I thought that it was all kind of a joke and that I was in a movie and that I was because it all started in December 2017. I thought I was I had developed some paranoia, and I thought I was being pursued by the movie director David Lynch. I thought that I was being filmed by him and that that he was making a movie about me called Gaslight and that he had stolen ideas from me. And that he had, done stuff to me, and that he had, affected my life, and that he was now out to get me. And I mean that's pretty aggressive to say. Like that's pretty like outlandish to say like now that I'm like stable, but like at the time, like I really believed that, and that was like that's a stunning thing to say. Um, but I I acted upon that in certain ways that I would go running out into the streets like afraid for my life, and I was screaming at family members, and I attacked family members, and I was just I had done things because I was afraid for my life, and I was afraid that I was angry, I felt betrayed. I just had gone through all these series of emotions because I thought that I was um being pursued and filmed, and it was terrible. It was this terrible feeling that you're being watched all the time and being, that that your family's being used against you and that you can't trust anybody, um and then all of a sudden you're being taken away and being put in the mental hospital because this is happening. So it's like this very confusing time, like you're not sure what's happening, and they're telling you you have bipolar and that you're have psychosis, and they're telling you you need to take medication. So you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, this is just part of the movie, this is all not happening, this isn't real, okay, whatever. And it's like it's just playing into your psychosis, like this isn't real, you're okay, whatever. So like my psychosis went on for a really long time because it played in everything that was happening played into what was happening to me. and it went on for 2 months. I was in psychosis for 2 months because everything just played into my thoughts that I was having. Even though I was taking medication, they ramped me up, like, my medication up so high that I turned into a zombie. I was just, like, drooling, and I was just a mess because I just I couldn't come down. There was no way. They had to, like, ramp me up so much that I just wasn't able to stop the thoughts, and that I wasn't able to come down from having this psychosis, until finally I started to break a little, but I still wasn't able to come down. It took me, um I mean, it's okay, Igni. You know, it happens. Uh, you learn from it, and I am better now. I still suffer from some delusions, but it's not as bad as it was. It's a process. I've had to work through it, but it definitely it, and it sounds so fantastic when someone tells you that they have all of these thoughts in their head, like, you know, wow, like that's intense. Like that's an intense thing that somebody says, like that they just all of a sudden develop these ideas, like, you know what I mean? Like you don't. It almost sounds unbelievable that it happened, and it happened so quickly. Almost it happened over a period of maybe a couple months, and I just I don't know, it changed me in a way that um, was irreversible, and that I've been trying to undo for the last several years.
Yeah, that sounds like it was a terrifying experience in a way because the mind has a very powerful way of rationalizing things and and putting puzzle pieces together that may seem very logical to us. And when it comes to situations like that, it literally takes some sort of outside force, like medication, to kind of factory reset in a way.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really powerful that you can now look back on that and reflect on it and be like, well, this is what I learned from it. This is how I've been trying to bounce back from that experience.
Yeah. Um, yeah, my second episode wasn't as severe as my first episode, but yeah, I I talk about my second episode in a video, but I'm really embarrassed about my second episode. Actually, I laugh about it, but it was just as I think my second episode is actually more has a lot more distressing factors because I went so willingly, and it had so much damage that it caused, um, and that it was so mentally embarrassing. But it and I really thought that I had learned after that episode that wouldn't do things like that ever again. And then I had another episode just recently, so I thought that it was over, and then it wasn't over. So, like, it's just it keeps like, the fact that it's so persistent is just, like, it's so it's so niggling, like, it's so persistent, like, you have to be, like, so on it, and the fact that, like, it doesn't matter, like, how much time passes, it's still, like it's still there. It just, like, is super depressing to me, like, the fact that I'm still struggling with it is super depressing for me. Then, like, I have to keep on it all the time, like, it's super depressing.
Mhm. That, like, I know, prior to doing this video with you today, because I've been thinking about some of my own struggles too, and I know that we have moments where we think that we have successfully overcome something, and then something happens and we're kind of thrown back to a prior point we thought that we had traversed. And like for me, when I experience moments like that, I'm always thinking to myself, is it because I'm not working hard enough? Is it because I am surrounding myself with the wrong people? Is it because I'm not as self-aware as I as I tout myself to be? And in like I've just realized that when there are chemical imbalances, when there are things happening in your mind that you can't control without outside help, I have to convince myself that it isn't my fault. Like it isn't something that I can blame specifically on myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's hard not to beat yourself up about it. It I do it a lot. I really I really am mean to myself about it because I think like maybe I should have known better, and like maybe if I hadn't done this or done that, like maybe I would be in a better spot, or like just just silly things that like don't, or like is it the imbalance, or is it me just acting on or is it just my behaviors? That's another one. That's another question that I often ask myself. Is it me just doing it, or is it my chemical imbalance?
Mhm.
Cuz like with LA, what happened with LA is I went to Chicago and I convinced a couple to buy me a plane ticket, and I flew to LA. And so I conned this couple out of money to buy me a plane ticket. And I feel really bad about that, and like that's something that like bothers me to this day, like that I had done that. um that I had like put on a really big show and done this. And like I'm not somebody who does things like this on a regular basis or at all. I'm not somebody like that. So it just I think like, was that the bipolar acting, or was that me doing that? And like, did I just do that because I was highly motivated to get to LA, or was it just because I was in a bipolar fit and that I was acting irrationally and just not thinking clearly? And like, I mean, it's hard to discern, like, and I just like I wrestle with that every day, and I like think about that, like, would I have done that under normal circumstances? And it's like the answer no, I wouldn't normally do that. So I have to say it's probably the bipolar, but like I don't know, I just feel an immense amount of guilt about it.
Mhm. I mean, it sounds like you were using like deductive reasoning, like I wouldn't do this normally. So, and I think, and I agree with you because I mean, I know you, you're a phenomenal human being. And I don't think anything but your mental state at the time would have provoked something like that to happen. So, but at the same time, like that guilt, I mean, it sounds like that guilt is extremely powerful too. Like you have the guilt battling against that deductive, rational, like you speaking to yourself through the through your understanding of the experience. Do you have any other like ways to like distract yourself from that like battle between guilt and the deductive side? Or I mean, I guess that's not necessarily, maybe distracting is not the correct word, but do you have any other methods of accepting it? Or um I guess accepting it would be probably the best
I
that
just
I could.
move on. I just tell myself that, there's nothing I can do and that it's in the past and that I have to move forward with my life. You can't just live in that moment forever and that it's just something that you're going to have to accept and that, it's part of what happened and that, you know, um you can't let it eat away at you otherwise it'll just destroy you and
Mhm.
then just have to accept what happened and move on. And usually what I do is with a lot of my um with a lot of my episodes I compartmentalize them. I put them in a box and then I just put them away
Mhm.
so that I just don't dwell on them.
It almost sounds
That's
like you're proving to yourself that you have the power over them in a way.
Yeah, it's also kind of an unhealthy coping mechanism that I just like, this is over. I'm putting it in a box and I'm just putting it on the shelf and then it's gone and it's over there and I don't have to deal with it anymore. It's just gone and away and I don't have to unpack it and it's gone.
But when you look at like conversations like these though, like I think that proves that you don't always do that though. You don't always compartmentalize them and then like sweep them under a rug. And I think being able to have this conversation, especially to kind of like reopen that that box that you put things in, that's very strong. It's a very strong act, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I like pick at the box, like I think about it and I like, but like most of the time I'm not thinking about it. Most of the time I like, because I have to like live my life and I can't just sit there and like, well, let me think about that time I like screwed over a couple and like, let me think about the time I ran through the streets and took off my clothes and then let me think about the time I like stabbed a door and like let me think about the time I like ruined my life and like like I can't just like sit there and like dwell on all these things that like are really horrible and like are like really shattering to me because it's like I'm just gonna tear myself apart, like
Mhm.
or like, let me think about the time I like wandered around an apartment building that wasn't mine and like looked
That's
for
like
a
that's a
celebrity.
very thought-provoking message though. Like because and that actually that's very meaningful to me too because I'm one of those people that I literally if I make any mistake, no matter how small the mistake is, I have like a Rolodex of it in my mind. Like think of my brain is a card catalog of all the mistakes that I have ever made. And I so often will just like pull out the card catalog and be like, what mistake did I make on this day 10 years ago? La, la. And and
Like the
you
Facebook, you've got a memory to look back on. Remember when
exactly.
you said this to this person
Exactly.
and they looked at you funny?
My learning experience has been being able to look back at my prior mental health difficulties or memories that are challenging or mistakes that I've made and being able to understand that I can examine them without re-experiencing them. Because I used to be the person that like if I were to like read an old journal or something, I would be reliving that exact moment in all of its like emotional turmoil and all of the bad coping that I would do, so like that being able to understand that, yes, this happened and it'll be a part of me, but I also need to move forward with my life because I still have life to live. That is really powerful. I really thank you for that.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris is on. Hi, Chris. I'm trying to catch up on the chat. My apologies. Um, so I do have a supplemental question for you, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, of course,
Mhm.
because I know this is a lot of like very, very deep, dense stuff that we're talking about. So I know from experience how important it is to have people around you who understand, who are encouraging and supportive when you're having the deepest mental health difficulties. Would you describe that, like, how has your experiences affected the people around you, and do you have that support network you need?
Oh, I definitely have the support network I need. I have my sister and my mom, definitely. They've been there through every mental health hurdle ever. Uh, it's it's been hard on them, but they've been there for me, and I definitely appreciate that. Um, it's been a long road for them, and they've been there for me. I have the support of all of my doctors, and I have so many doctors. Um, so I have my therapist, and I have my psychiatrist, and I have my social worker, and I have uh, just so my PCP, my primary care physician, and I just have so many people who are on my side, just going to bat for me, asking me if I'm okay, and what I'm thinking about, if I have delusions, everything, all the time, constantly monitoring me, making sure that taking my meds, and making sure that I have everything I need, and just making sure that I'm okay. So like I have this support network that I need. I have friends that are checking in on me. I have support network. Like that's not a problem. Like I definitely feel supported. It's just I'm not supporting myself. And I need to
Yeah.
be more supportive of myself.
So, I mean, other than the categorization, how else would you describe yourself as not being supportive of yourself?
um I think that I'm just mean to myself sometimes, and I just like I think that like I try to like I think that I it was just really devastating to be get the diagnosis of bipolar, and that I think that it like sort of encompassed my whole life when I got bipolar, and that I just like made it everything in the beginning because I was so devastated by it because it like I felt like it had destroyed my whole life. And like I'm just starting to like now realize that like, well, hey, like like taking a step back and like, well, hey, like it didn't actually like destroy everything. It didn't ruin my life. Like it's just a diagnosis, and like I still have a life. Like I
Mhm.
just it's just a different life. It's a different life than I expected. And so like I just have to like work within the confines of this new life. And like, okay, so now it's different. How am I gonna live this new life? Well, okay. But like it's just coming to that realization that my life is different now is hard, hard pill to accept. And I'm just trying to like work with it and trying to like yeah, I'm just trying to work with it. And
Yeah.
it's just not fun. It's a lot of work.
Well, I have confidence that you will keep keep
It requires a lot
steadfast
of
on your journey.
it requires a lot of changes on my part, like, I have a lot of unhealthy things that I do. Like, I've attached myself in the past to a lot of unhealthy people. Oh, I have a bipolar 1. So, because I had a manic episode that was more than, 2 weeks, I have bipolar 1.
So that's because my like I mean I've done research on bipolar, but not like a lot of it. So is that what distinguishes the difference between one and two, like the
Yeah,
length
if you have a
of?
manic episode that it lasts more than a certain length of time, it's bipolar 1.
Mm, okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. And I think what a lot of people don't like talking about mental health, especially with regard to like bipolar, because there's like so many different stereotypes associated with it, and I think that's just been perpetuated by people who literally, well, one, who villainize mental health entirely or deny it, number two, or number three, people who might be afraid to face it themselves. So I think it's important for people to do that research to know the differences between um, different mental health um, bouts and difficulties and diagnoses.
Yeah, I was scared originally to talk about it because I thought that, like, people might judge me, and then I thought, like, well, if I share my story and, like, I, like, reach out and, like, tell my story and, like, maybe somebody it'll help somebody, or, like, maybe it'll just be, like maybe I can just, like, get my story out and, like, I'll feel, like, a sense of, like, catharsis about it. So then I just started talking about it on camera and, like, I felt so much better. It just felt so good to, like, talk about it and just, like
I can definitely relate to that. When I moved to Missouri to do my master's program a few years ago, I was going through a very deep depressive stint. Like I was excited that I was moving, and I was feeling like the high associated with that for a while, but then as soon as I moved, it like dropped.
Mhm.
And like being so isolated from everyone, I like it forced me to do a lot of thinking, and that's when I decided to start talking a little bit more about mental health on my own YouTube channel. That I ended up doing the video series bullying my story of survival, because a lot of my mental health was definitely, well, a lot of my difficulties have been very much shaped by bullying experiences when I was in high school. I'm not going to like recount all of them, because if you want, you can go watch those videos, because it's literally an 8-part series. Like, I cannot summarize 8-part like that, all that stuff in the remaining 22 minutes that we have, because that would be a lot. Um, but suffice it to say, I learned that there are very specific things that have shaped my depression, and being able to talk about that, like talk myself through it on camera, helped me develop a stronger understanding of myself.
Mhm.
And it pointed me in the direction of resources that I needed. And I think a lot of like our biggest obstacle sometimes is ourselves, because we are taught every day that mental health isn't something super significant. A lot of people still think that it's just this liberal ruse of like, oh, well, you just want attention from people, type of thing. But that's not the case. That couldn't be more far from the truth. Like it is the exact opposite. And for me, I like it forced me to do a lot of introspection with regard to when my mental health difficulties began. And they began for me when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I don't talk about this often, but my grandmother was my first bully. And suffice it to say, she would say unbelievably horrible things to me all the time. And in order to just cope with those things, I had to internalize what she said, and I just started believing them. And that wasn't a healthy thing for me to do, like even at that age. But as I got older, when I started getting bullied for, say, like being gay and for a variety of other things, I learned to just internalize all of that hate being thrown at me. And when I grew past those bullies, like after high school, the bullies weren't there, but I was still saying those things to myself
Right.
all the time. I was saying that you're never going to amount to anything. I was saying you're a dumb, insert derogatory gay term, like I was saying that I didn't deserve to live. Like I ended up I ended up trying to take my life on more than one occasion, and both times failed, thankfully. And when I got to college for my undergrad, that's when I finally got help. I got therapy, thankfully, at my university. Well, we both went to the same university. At my
Mhm.
university, um, they did have some very good mental health services, and I had counseling for about a year, and it helped me considerably. And I always tell people that I probably wouldn't be here without that. And it was utterly terrifying, like making the decision to finally get help. But I was in a way at a very crucial juncture, because I was like, do I get help or do I cease to exist? Like that's what it was down to. And and that help finally happened. Now that I'm in my 30s, I'm trying really, really hard to look at my own mental health as something that I have to continually be vigilant about. Something
Right.
like it's something that I have to monitor. It can be exhausting, yes, but in doing so, I'm starting to learn more about my own mental health.
Mhm.
In fact, I'm preparing to go back to therapy myself very soon, because I've been going through a stint over the past year where I've known that I needed help. And I think if anybody is questioning whether or not they should get help, I think that if you're even questioning that, that means that you're at a point where you should at least look into some resources that might benefit you. Okay.
Right.
Now,
'Cause
everybody's experiences differ, but if you're like consciously, literally even considering, should I do this? I think that's important. Like that's a sign for me, at least.
'Cause I probably waited too long, when I was in Seattle, to go to a therapist, because I was like, I knew that I should have gone to a therapist before I had my breakdown, and, I was thinking before I had my breakdown that I was like, "I feel like I need to see a therapist," and I have notes that said, "See a therapist," and I just didn't go, and, it's just yeah, I wonder how much I would have saved had I gone to a therapist before I had a breakdown.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've also, like recently, I've been thinking that I probably over a year ago should have gotten back into therapy. Um, and now, because I would always like write it on a to-do list, like research therapists, like look for resources, and I would never do that.
Mhm.
And I know for me, one of my biggest struggles, and I feel guilty for having felt this way, but my biggest struggle was overcoming my fear of the potential that medication could be in my future.
Oh, were you medication scared?
Yes, yes. At least I very much used to be until about a year ago, when I started kind of thinking about, like, if it is a chemical imbalance and I need something to correct that chemical imbalance, like, like, what is the harm in feeling normal for a change? Normal, that's how I characterized it as normal, right? But feeling not horrible, I guess that is the way I look at it. But I I think the moment I discovered this, or the moment that I came to the realization that I shouldn't be terrified of medication, was I went through a bout of really deep depression for about like 2 months, and then I had maybe 2 or 3 days where I felt that normal that I would, claim it to be. And when I felt like that normalness, it felt like I felt like I was high. And it felt very strange. Like I knew something felt off. And I actually talked to you a few days ago about this, but bipolar runs in my family as well on my mom's side. And hearing of your experiences and listening to you talk about them made me start thinking about my own family history and the significance of me stopping ignoring that, because I would always ignore it and overlook it. So that's one motivating factor also for me going back into therapy, is being able to finally know, like, is this for sure something that I have, or is it not,
Mhm.
Yeah. So, um, but but again, the truth is, like, that vigilance, again, I'm gonna circulate back to that for a second. I think that's very important because
Hey, Igni, I think it's important to go to therapy, and I hope that you do find somebody who is skilled. It took me, I tried going to therapy several times before I found someone who actually matched up with me that was a good match. So, yeah, it does take a little work sometimes, but it's worth it.
Mhm. Not to mention, like, a lot of like, the therapists have, like, different strengths and different, like, areas of focus. So, like, on your journey, um, like, also look at their skills and their backgrounds to kind of get to know them too. Like, that's something that I didn't do before, but that's something that I'm doing now. Like, for example, like, I really want a therapist who is, like, LGBTQ plus knowledgeable, because there are a lot of, like, things that I want to discuss related to that. Um, so, and that could be like, I mean, that could be the same thing for, like, different conditions you may think you have too. Like, if you find somebody who specializes in that, that might be very helpful. So, so I wanted to pan out a little bit because I just realized we have like 12 minutes left. But that's what happens when we have really good, deep conversation. Time seems to fly, right? So I wanted to pan this out a little bit, considering this is still Pride Month. I want to talk about the significance of mental health in the LGBTQ plus community. So I was doing some research because I had a conversation the other day with somebody about conversion therapy, and wanted to look at and see what states had actually banned conversion therapy. So for those of you who do not know, conversion therapy is, and I'm going to quote glad.org, it's any attempt to change a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. However, because the practice has come under increasing scrutiny, most providers frequently change their terminology in order to circumvent the term conversion therapy. So basically, it is different, like, groups who think that one's identity can be changed through either medical or conditioning processes. And and that's a reality that a lot of LGBTQ plus people fear, because people who don't understand that may interpret their identity as being a mental illness, or something that they can have medically fixed in some way forcibly. And I decided to look up some let's see, some statistics, and I'm gonna try to do a share screen on here. Let me know if this works. Hopefully this works.
Can we just decide for a second so I can say sorry that you have anxiety, RP? I just saw your comment and I just wanted to say
Oh,
I'm
I'm sorry
sorry.
about that too. Sorry, I apologize that I'm not monitoring the chat box more. So, okay, let's see. Share screen. How do I do this? Okay. Okay, here we go. I think everybody should. Can everybody see this? Okay. Hopefully everybody can see this. So I was looking at the different states that let's see, where was it? These are the states that have passed laws protecting LGBTQ plus people from conversion therapy. There's only 14 states. That's alarming to me. And that suggests that there are many other places that don't regulate this, or there are even places that don't even have conversations about conversion therapy. And I think it's important to draw more awareness to this atrocity. I'll just flat out call it an atrocity. So
Yeah. I
let
saw
me
that Michigan wasn't on that list.
yeah, Michigan is not on that list, which I didn't realize. I for some reason thought that Michigan was. And I'll do one more screen share so you can see another visual because I'm all about visuals. Let's see here. Was it? Yep, I think it's this one. This is this is a visual representation of the states. Um, some states like North Carolina partially ban it, but they don't like I've read that the terminology and the policy behind it is extremely vague. But even more concerning, I also saw did it okay. This for some reason StreamYard doesn't notify you when a screen share ends and it confuses me. Sorry guys. I was looking at some statistics and uh I saw that 698,000 LGBTQ plus adults ages 18 to 59 in the US have received conversion therapy. That's an enormous number. I didn't think the number was that gigantic. And 350,000 of those adults received treatment as adolescents. 20,000 LGBTQ youths from ages 13 through 17 will receive conversion therapy from a licensed healthcare professional before they reach the age of 18 in the 41 states that currently do not ban the practice. So that suggests to me that in many areas, conversion therapy is still like believed to be like a reliable medical practice when it's not. So, and they also have different terms, like I was mentioning earlier, for like because conversion therapy has become like a word that a lot of people have heard. It's been used in the media a lot. People are more educated about it than they used to be. But now, people are told like or given different identifiers like it could be called sexual orientation change efforts, sexual attraction fluidity exploration and therapy, reparative therapy, promoting healthy sexuality or sexuality counseling. There are many others. So I just wanted to briefly talk about that because that is one area of
It's just ridiculous.
yeah, like it's one area of identity that's not discussed a lot, and it's often lumped in with mental health, and it's completely different. And in a way, like I also think that practitioners who engage in this, they don't acknowledge also the fact that mental health stigmas are out there too, because they
Mm,
confuse them, you know.
right.
So but yeah, so now that we're down to our last few minutes, do we want to do some poems?
Yes, let's do some poetry.
All right. So, what poems do you have for us this evening?
I actually I think I'm gonna do one because we're short on time.
I'm gonna just do one too.
Okay, it's called When I Was Manic. Uh, so here we go. I'm thinking about a lot of stuff right now, like how the nurse said UTIs can mess up old people, make them violent and stuff, give them dementia, put them in an early grave. Ooh, I lost my place. And I'm thinking about Christmas Day when I walked out of that Starbucks and screamed to the heavens and all of the creatures in it, "Fuck all of you." I knew they were all lying. And on the Krispy Kreme sign, there was a handwritten answer, spray painted, "Love all," in red paint. I sat there freezing in the December chill below the sign, contemplating what I had just said and how I was probably a bad person, and then I got what I deserved, which wasn't true either.
Wow. 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 So describe the headspace you were in when you wrote that. Like, what were your thoughts?
So, I had a UTI when I had gone into the hospital, and they said that that may be the reason why I had been like so out of it for so long, like because I had a UTI. And that might have been like the originator of my first manic episode of like why I started to get paranoid and why I was having so many problems, is because I had a UTI. And they said that UTIs are like so damaging to old people. So after the fact, as I'm writing this, and this is like I started writing poetry in October 2018, I was just really thinking about like my first manic episode and like what my first manic episode was like, and just like I was just thinking about this moment of when I walked out of the Starbucks that one day, and it was a really cold December day, and I just remember like all of these emotions rushing through me, and just like I just remember that day where I was just like screaming. I was just screaming. And then I
Mm,
saw this sign and it said "Love all." And then I just like felt like a rush of emotion about that. And then I just sat down and I just was like felt so guilty that I had been screaming. And I just like contemplated "Love all." And I
that's
was
really
like,
powerful.
yeah.
And it's interesting how like small moments like that can elicit so much too.
Right, but it was part of the manic episode. That's how my manic episodes go, is like things like that happen all the time during my manic episodes. Is like I'll be like all of a sudden like I'll be screaming and then all of a sudden I'll be like lucid.
It's like a magnification in a way from the description of it. Well, and I know I was talking to you a while back too about like because I was talking through my own thought process about like what could potentially be, um, you know, the thing affecting me. And there's like just this vibrance, this visceralness of being in a manic state.
Oh, everybody's saying my poetry was nice. Thank you.
And I would completely agree. Like, see,
Thank you.
that's why I love that we kind of end these with poetry now because it's empowering to see all of these things through a creative perspective, you know. So,
Your
since we have a couple
turn.
minutes left, I'm going to read mine really quickly. So, I decided to pick a poem that, to me, like if I am bipolar, like people in my family are, it describes for to me what it feels like to be in that like very like ethereally, that's not even a word, but it is now, manic like type of state. Okay. This poem is called Caldera. It was a poem I wrote about a year ago during my like Octopoember series, and it really describes this to me. So here it is, Caldera. Dew condenses in my basins until it spills down slopes, and rivers cut swaths through soft basalt as the nuclear morning peaks above the horizon for what seems like the first time. My fallout sits heavy atop the landscape. The haze from last night's atomic meltdown is no match for the dawn as it burns away every ash curtain I try to keep. My core has grown torpid in its tumultuous spin, but still combusts to keep the inner iron molten. Now, as the eerie post cataclysm quiet permeates the valley, subtle sparks stir beneath the surface, alive. So, that, like, for me, this just, it encapsulates how hopeful I feel when I come out of those very long depressive states. But I was hoping that it also captured the eeriness of how high how high that is, like how high I become, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Like nuclear is like nuclear and it's like kind of like radiated and it's almost like it's almost like high energy, but it's like not quite like
Mhm. Like
it's
the dawn is so beautiful, but it's also in a way blinding,
right.
overwhelming. Oh, Jalera says, "I miss you guys. It brings me joy to see both of you." Oh, we miss you too. And thank you.
Oh my gosh, we're at an hour. How did we talk for a whole hour about mental health? We did it.
Because we are badass people. That like honestly, like I know we're gonna end here in a couple minutes or so, but I think both Ari and I, because we talked about this briefly, we both were feeling a little bit of nervousness talking about this because it's a very, I mean, it dredges up a lot of memories, a lot of difficult experiences. But at the end of the day, for me especially too, like, and I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, it's very much a catharsis, you know?
Yeah, it's a very important subject, very sensitive, important subject though.
Hmm. Yeah. So, RP, if you could email me about that, that would be awesome. So, but um, but yeah, do you have any parting words before we depart for the evening?
Just thanks for joining us. It was my favorite one so far.
Same here. I really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your schedules to watch. And for those of you who watch this in the future through the playback, I appreciate you taking the time to watch it too. Don't forget to subscribe to Strange Nothings, Ari's channel. Subscribe to mine too if you haven't yet. Click like below, and of course, share your thoughts. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye.